everyone, depending on where you are in the country right now. Welcome to our third Listserv Live session. Our moderator today will be Dr. McNeely. He certainly is probably well known to everyone. He has moderated all of these before. He is an urgent care fellow through the college. He's a former UCA board member and also the former president of the UCA board, and currently serves as the immediate past president of the College of Urgent Care Medicine's board of directors. We have an exciting panel today, and he will introduce them as we move through the agenda. A few housekeeping items. We have such a large audience today. We changed the format of this one a little bit. We're excited about how many people are out there, but we are going to do things a little bit differently compared to the last Listserv. But we do hope that it will continue to be very interactive. So in order to do that, though, we ask that you put any questions you have as we move along in the chat section at the lower end or lower side of this Zoom meeting. It should be at the bottom of your screen. This session is also being recorded, so if you miss something or if you have to step away for a moment, it will be available for you in recording. And I will close up with some comments when we finish. I'll also help field some of the questions, but at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. McNeely. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Hopefully everyone is warm. It's like -9 out there today, and by me with about 12 inches of snow. So let's hope that everyone's keeping warm. I know we're all over the country. Good afternoon, good evening, what have you. It's 5 o'clock somewhere on the East Coast here. Welcome to Listserv number 3. The third one is definitely going to be, I think, our most popular so far. I'm glad everyone was able to join us. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. Before we begin, I also want to take a moment and appreciate the millions of coronavirus patients urgent care has seen in the last year. This industry has truly stepped up and been there for our patients. Today, we are speaking about 2 more ways we can help. One is immunizations, and the second is monoclonal antibodies, although we're going to do them in the opposite order. If you could put the agenda up there for me.
Sorry, I continue to have challenges when we actually go live with these events to move this forward. Give me a minute here.
Okay. All right, well, I'll go ahead and start with it. So we're going to briefly talk about SARS-CoV-2. We're going to introduce our panelists. We're going to talk about the monoclonal antibodies. There we go, great. We're going to have an update from Eli Lilly. We're going to discuss the successful implementation of the monoclonal antibodies in the urgent care setting. We're going to talk about vaccine administration in urgent care. And we're going to talk about UCA's advocacy, which has been a lot. And then we're going to have some time for questions and answers. Like Laura said, please put your questions in the box for us. As I mentioned, it's been over a year now that we've been dealing with this novel coronavirus. It seems like yesterday, but it seems like a million years ago as well. I think our numbers are finally starting to drop in some areas or most areas, although some are still struggling more than others. Testing has improved and the methods and availability. Several vaccines are now available, as we know, 2 and perhaps 3, 4, 5 on the way. So treatments are also available and they're more in trials. It looks like there's some light at the end of the tunnel is visible, but we still have a lot of ways to go. So let's get into the bread and butter of this. Today's panel, we'll start with from those from HHS. Dr. Meredith Chuck will be speaking with us. Dr. Michael Anderson, Colonel Brian Burke, Jack Herman, Gina Smith, and Kirsten Henry will all be available to talk with us. So without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce Dr. Chuck. Dr. Meredith Chuck is the lead for the Allocation, Distribution, and Administration team at ASPR HHS, working with COVID-19 therapeutics team. She completed her Pediatric Hematology Oncology Fellowship at the Johns Hopkins National Cancer Institute Fellowship Program and was an instructor in the Pediatric Oncology branch of the NCI while completing a master's degree in clinical research through Duke University. Dr. Chuck was an assistant professor of pediatric at Children's Hospital Pittsburgh in the Department of Hematology Oncology before joining the FDA in 2013 as a medical officer and then serving as acting associate director for safety in the Office of Hematology and Oncology Products in CDER at FDA and in the Oncology Center for Excellence. Please welcome Dr. Chuck.
Excellent, great. Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. We look forward to talking with you about the monoclonal antibody program and some of the updates and ways and answer questions about how the urgent care centers, who are already a very important part of the fight in this pandemic, might be able to assist even further with monoclonal antibodies. So next slide, please. Just going through. So just real quickly, what I'd like to do is review the current monoclonal antibodies that are under EUA and talk a little bit about the data that supported those emergency use authorizations. Talk a bit about patient eligibility criteria, outline what sites might need to have on hand in order to administer the monoclonal antibodies as per the EUA, and then talk a little bit about where we think that urgent care centers might be able to play a role, either directly for providing infusions for patients or more likely becoming part of that very important and timely referral pathway that we all know is critical in being able to timely provide treatment for our high-risk patients in order to realize that goal for reducing hospitalizations. Next slide. Excellent. So when we talk about the monoclonal antibodies, we're really talking about that early symptomatic pre-hospital treatment. So really this is the only therapy, monoclonal antibodies are the only therapy that are authorized by FDA for treatment of high-risk patients in the outpatient setting. So again, those authorizations were made based upon the potential to decrease hospitalizations in our high-risk patients. And we're seeing that both in clinical trial data and also some of the observational data from large health systems that are collecting outcomes data as well. Next slide. So 3 monoclonal antibodies have been granted emergency use authorization by FDA, and HHS ASPR is responsible for the fair and transparent allocation and distribution of those products. And again, our goal is to facilitate the effective uptake and use of these monoclonals to really realize the goal of decreasing hospitalizations, both to improve patient care and also decrease the burden on the health systems during the pandemic. Next slide. So very briefly, I wanted to go over some of the data that supported the initial authorizations. There's been this is a very changing field. There's data coming out almost weekly from some of the clinical trials. So just wanted to take a step back and really take a look at the data that underlie those emergency use authorizations. So the first EUA was issued for bamlanivimab, which is a product from Lilly that was based on the BLAZE-1 trial. Again, these were early on in the development. These were phase 2 studies with a primary endpoint that was biologic. It did meet the primary endpoint, but for the combination at that point. And the EUA was really issued based upon the secondary endpoint of that trial, which was the potential to decrease hospitalizations in high-risk patients. So that was about a 70% relative decrease, albeit small numbers, which is why it was an EUA and not an approval at that point. The second EUA was for a same indication for high-risk patients in the outpatient setting. This was from Regeneron, the casirivimab and devimab trial was actually run very similarly. The primary endpoint was actually a day 7 change in viral load, which was significant for the pooled treatment group. But again, the EUA was really based upon that potential to decrease hospitalizations, that clinical endpoint, which was again very similar, 70% relative decrease. Small numbers, but very similar to the initial EUA. The third EUA that was recently issued by FDA was based upon that same BLAZE-1 trial from Lilly. This just happened to be a phase 3 arm. So there were many arms to that BLAZE-1 trial. This was just a readout from the randomized phase 3 portion. And that one did have a primary endpoint of hospitalizations and death at day 29. And again, as you can see, it was that similar 70% relative reduction in hospitalizations. Again, that being the primary endpoint. At that point, it was significant, and the secondary endpoints were significant as well. And that was partially the data was based upon for that recent EUA as well. But as you can see, very similar across those products. Next slide. So the eligibility is the same for all 3 products. So patients with mild to moderate COVID who are at high risk for progressing to severe disease or hospitalization. Some of the key elements is that confirmation of positivity is via either a PCR or antigen test. It's really any direct SARS-CoV test, not an antibody test, but any direct viral testing. Patients are eligible by PCR or antigen. Per the EUA, patients need to be treated within 10 days of symptom onset But really we know earlier is better. So this is the critical part of that treatment pathway, that referral pathway. Patients need to be tested early, they need to be treated early because the outcomes are clearly better. And again, patients are symptomatic, but are not in the hospital and have no oxygen requirement at this point. There's actually a long list, as we all know, of particular eligibility criteria that are listed below. The main categories are age over 65, BMI over 35, or age younger than 65 and over 12, with a number of comorbidities. And you can reference that list there in the fact sheet for all the specific eligibility criteria. Next slide. We put together just a little bit of a readiness checklist. Of course, there are playbooks. There is the EUA letter of authorization that sites need to adhere to, but this is just a general considerations for sites that would like to administer the monoclonal antibodies. Certainly a dedicated place and a way to manage patient flow, particularly in areas that are managing COVID positive patients and non-COVID positive patients. So paying particular attention to that infection control procedures is critical. Dedicated source of supplies, both for the placement of the IV and then also for the potential to treat anaphylactic reactions. That's a condition of the EUA. That is, infusion-related reactions and more severely anaphylaxis are rare, but are possible. So that's something that sites need to be prepared to handle. Sufficient personnel for the demand. Obviously, someone to prescribe. The prescriber does not necessarily have to be on site, but needs to be somewhere within that referral pathway. And then folks to place the IV, hang the drug, and then do that monitoring. Of note, there does not need to be a pharmacist on site, so this can be prepared at the bedside. And there's a lot of additional information about the playbook in the playbooks about preparation as well. And then on preparing for the administration process, a pre-visit to ensure eligibility criteria are met. Treatment, we say up to an hour. There have been recent modifications to the EUA for bamlanivimab that allow an infusion of 16 minutes, depending on the dilution. That's diluted in a 50 ml bag. So it does allow for shorter infusion times, which should help with throughput. There's currently still a 1 hour observation period, although we did learn that there is data under evaluation to see if that also can be shortened. But currently the EUA does maintain that 1 hour post-infusion period, even with the shorter duration of infusion. Emergency protocol, again, for assessing and potentially treating any allergic reactions. And then process for reimbursement, again, CMS has created a lot of flexibility in the site of care, and that standard reimbursement, which we have heard that private payers as well have been following, either a multiple of or at least the CMS rate as well. Again, these are just administration costs. The drug has been purchased by the federal government and there's no cost for the drug. And then any reporting needs. So any site needs to be able to report any serious adverse reactions that are at least thought to be related to the drug to the FDA. And then utilization reporting. This is really critical. So any site that receives product will need to report back on what they have on hand and then what they've used. And then there are just some other reporting requirements for information to have on hand at the site as per the letter of authorization of the EUA. Next slide. So, where we think that urgent care centers and where we'd really like to have this dialogue and to be able to help sort of in this area is if they're not able to actually provide the infusions, and certainly we encourage any that can, and we're certainly happy to assist or help on any questions for that. We think that with the possibility of rapid testing to be part of that referral pathway, and that's really critical, of being able to have a patient with a positive test who might meet eligibility criteria and have the ability to then refer that patient to an infusion center in a timely manner so that they are able to be treated. So a very critical part of the process. And then to share experiences. So we would love to hear any urgent care centers who've had experiences with monoclonals administration, any questions, any concerns, and just looking forward to the dialogue. So thanks so much. I believe that is the last slide. Yep, that's it. Great.
All
Happy
right.
for any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Chuck. We appreciate it. This just sounds like a great advantage for our patients and something we should be looking into. We did have one question. Does the Abbott molecular test meet the criteria?
So if it's a PCR or an antigen test, it's as long as it's a direct viral detection test. The only thing that doesn't meet criteria would be like an actual serum antibody test. But as long as it's a direct viral test, it does. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Okay, I think we may have one more. We had one more question. How much is the reimbursement? Is that standard, or does it depend on the product, or?
So the standard CMS reimbursement is about $310. And again, from what we've heard is that private payers are either paying that or paying a multiple of that, but it does vary by the commercial payer. And Medicaid also does cover, Medicaid also covers the infusion services as well at a similar rate.
So the reimbursement is for giving the medication, or does that include the cost of the drug?
There's no drug fee because the drug is free. So there isn't, so that is just an administration cost.
Okay. All right, excellent. Anyone else have any other questions?
There's a hand raised, Dr. McNeely.
Okay.
We have some people using that feature versus the chat.
Yeah, if you could just put it in the chat, we'd appreciate it because it's easier to see. Let me see, we have a few others. Is there any backlog to get the drugs? I already know the answer to that. There are actually a significant amount of drugs out there and we want to use them. And one of the reasons why we're presenting today is because not enough people are using these drugs for the patients who might be out there. Anyone disagree with that comment?
Absolutely true. There is plenty of supply. And if you hear otherwise, please let us know. And please dispel those rumors.
Okay. Is there any specific script that's needed for this? I guess a provider has to order the infusion, correct? Nothing, not a prescription. No,
a provider just has to order the infusion, correct?
Okay. Another question is there any room for provider discretion on who should get the drug, or must we use the strict criteria?
So providers must adhere to the EUA eligibility criteria. It's not, like an approved drug. There would be sort of room for off-label prescription, off-label prescribing. Because it is an EUA, there is the requirement to adhere to those terms. It's a pretty broad list. We understand that there are some requests to look at that and make things a little bit broader, especially given sort of the age cutoffs. But as of now, per the FDA, based upon the data that they've reviewed, it's to adhere to those terms, those eligibility criteria.
Okay. Questions are coming in fast and furious. A few of them I'm going to hold for our team that actually is doing this. Is there any specific storage needed for this drug?
Just refrigerator.
Beyond your standard refrigerator. Okay, excellent. All right. So we're going to move on to the next presentation. We'll get some of these questions at the end as well. I'd like to welcome Dr. Mark Williams from Lilly, who's going to be talking about their product. Dr. Williams?
Yes, thank you very much for the kind invitation. And so I'm not going to share any slides, but I'd like to share just a few thoughts with you and some updates. Lilly was very pleased that on February 9th, FDA did grant an emergency use authorization for our combination of our two monoclonal antibodies. So that would be bamlanivimab, which, as you know, received an emergency use authorization just before Thanksgiving, but also our second antibody, which is etesevimab. And we think it's important that these be available to certain patients. So these are, again, for patients who are having mild to moderate COVID-19 who are at high risk of developing severe disease, meaning hospitalization. We believe that the 70% reduction in ER visits or hospitalizations is a clinically meaningful endpoint and led to the emergency use authorization. I do want to second comment by Dr. Chuck is that these drugs are not approved. They've not been proven to be safe nor effective. However, they have been granted emergency use authorization, and we do need to follow the high risk criteria very carefully. I'm also happy to report that recently the FDA updated our fact sheets both for bamlanivimab alone and then the combination of bamlanivimab plus etesevimab to shorten the infusion time. We heard very early that the 1 hour infusion time plus 1 hour of monitoring time was cumbersome for some infusion centers, and so we certainly heard that feedback and worked very aggressively to try to shorten those infusion times. So for bamlanivimab alone, it's 16-minute infusion time. And then for the combination of bamlanivimab and etesevimab, it's 21 minutes. I will say my third point is that we're continuing to try to shorten that time. We're working expeditiously to hopefully move into a a setting of maybe an intravenous. Ultimately, our goal would be to have a subcutaneous administration. Of course, we need to do the clinical trials, which are ongoing, and the planning and the operation of that. So we hope to provide even further shortening of the infusion time to an IV push or subcutaneous. And the final comment and update I'd like to make is that we are closely following and monitoring the evolution of the virus. And we know that all viruses tend to evolve over time, and certainly the SARS-CoV-2 is no different. And there's been a lot of press and a lot of scientific and non-scientific interest in this. So we're following this very closely, and we actually have 2 second-generation monoclonal antibodies that we are carefully studying to hopefully provide some assistance if these particular variants take hold around the world. So that's a short update for what Lilly is doing and what we've done, what we're doing, and what we hope to provide in the future. So thank you again very much for the opportunity to present.
Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. We do have one question that's pretty much for you. What is the criteria for adding the second medication? Is it different? Is it the same? When would you choose the 2 versus the 1?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. The criteria are the same. You have to be at high risk for developing severe COVID-19. I would say it's a judgment call by the practitioner. We do know that there in the large study that was mentioned earlier by Dr. Chuck, we had further reduction in viral load with the combination. And so for certain patients, that might be even more important. However, we do believe that bamlanivimab alone does provide an important reduction in hospitalization and ER visits. So we think there's a role for both. I will have to say that's really a judgment call on the practitioner's standpoint.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We're going to move on.
Hey, Sean, we do have one more.
Yes.
Dr. McNeely, one more question. I apologize. Does the patient need to be on cardiac monitor during infusion?
I think that's not mandated. It's something that would be up to the infusion center. But what you're really looking for is any signs of infusion reactions, allergy, things like that. So I don't believe that's standard practice for most infusion centers.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to our next group of panelists, Dr. Timbo Taylor and Emily Dawson. Who's a nurse practitioner from Main Street Family Care. They are successfully doing this. Dr. Taylor and Emily.
All right, thank you. I would answer that last question. We do not put ours on the cardiac monitor when we're doing it. And so, yeah, I'm Dr. Taylor. I'm the medical director with Main Street Family Urgent Care. This is Emily Dawson. She's here with me. We've got 20 clinics kind of throughout rural Alabama and Georgia. We're actually opening our 21st tomorrow. And we had a call back in late December, early January with the Department of Public Health here in Alabama. And they had mentioned that they were trying to get the monoclonal antibody treatments out into the communities, kind of more in the underserved communities, and kind of felt like we'd be a good fit. And so sometime in early January, we got a shipment or allotment of 50 monoclonal antibody treatments. It's the BAM. And we started implementing it in our clinic here in Pelham. Pelham is kind of a suburban community of Birmingham. And we've got about 6 clinics probably within an hour's drive of Birmingham. And so in an effort to kind of pilot it and see kind of how scalable it was, we kind of focused our treatment there in Pelham. And the clinic's a little unique there in that it's our suburban clinic, so it's a little bigger than our smaller kind of rural clinics, and it's got an extra procedure room. And so we're going to use that procedure room to do the infusions in. And we have a guy kind of on our corporate team who does all of our kind of new clinic training. He's an RN, he's got critical care background, does a lot of our new clinic training and spends a lot of his time in our kind of corporate offices in Birmingham. And so the way we kind of implemented it was we decided that he would go to the Pelham clinic from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and then we would kind of refer patients internally to the Pelham clinic to get the treatment. And so say a patient comes into our clinic in, Moody, which is 45 minutes away, 30 minutes away. If they were a candidate, the provider there would, discuss that with them and tell them, we are doing this treatment at one of our other facilities. If you're interested, we can call over there and get you an appointment. And so we would schedule an appointment, typically the following day or the next couple of days, whenever it works for the patient. And they would come in to Pelham, kind of be seen again, be reassessed by our provider. The provider there would go over everything again with them, make sure they're good with it. And if they were, then we would implement the treatment. And so we've done a total of 15, which isn't a lot. It doesn't move the needle as much as we want to. But we had, after we got our allotment of 50, we had a kind of another clinic in town that we've got a pretty good relationship with, who was trying to do it as well. So we actually split our allotment of 50 to 25 for them and 25 for us. We haven't had really any issues with it. I think we had one patient who might have got a little nauseated. But it's been, there's a little hesitancy to do something at first that you're not used to doing. But the more we've done it, the more people have gotten comfortable with it. The more we've gotten comfortable with it. And we kind of view it as a chance to see how we can scale that out to all of our clinics. It's been a little more difficult than I don't think it's more difficult than we anticipated, but doing something that's new, we're not an infusion center. We do IVs occasionally, but it's not something we do all the time. We don't typically infuse medicine over an hour. And so it's hasn't, I think we thought we'd do a lot more of it to begin with than we have, but we're definitely more comfortable with it. I think it does present some unique challenges in the urgent care world, in that, if it's great that it's may come down to a quicker infusion, but the infusion for an hour, watch them for an hour, that takes up patient rooms that you can normally, see more patients and bill more E&M visits. And so you don't want to kind of, block up a room for 2 hours for one patient.
So are you watching them in a room?
We've seen is that, we see a patient on day 2 or 3 of COVID in one of our clinics, and then we schedule them for an appointment 2 days later in our other clinic, and they come in and they kind of present, progress in their disease course, and so they're sick, and they're, it just brings a little level of complication into the clinic because it's a high-risk patient already who, may have, their heart rate's 110 when they come in. They may be feeling worse. So we've kind of viewed it as an opportunity to reassess the patient as well. I mean, you can see them again. On a couple of them, we've even ordered x-rays when they come back and see us to get the infusion. And so it gives us, it's kind of nice to have another touch point on it, but it does introduce a level of complexity back into the clinic. But, I think we as urgent care are uniquely positioned in this to really move the needle more than we have. And so we've been excited to do it. Emily, I don't know, do you have anything else to add to that? No? Okay. We've got, I looked this morning at our reimbursement earlier. It was mentioned that CMS was $310. I think we're getting $278.60 from Medicare and $216 from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama. So just adding that color to it. Sean, any questions or anything?
We did have one. I don't know if you heard me. Where are you keeping your patients when you're observing them? Are they staying in the room, or are you bringing them to a central room to watch them, or how are you doing that?
We're keeping them in the room, in the procedure room.
So we have, in my clinic, we do have 2 procedure rooms. So we're able to kind of isolate them on one side of the clinic in one large room where we can do all of the care in one place.
Okay. Do any of our panelists have information on billing? Where, if someone comes into your office and gets tested, gets an evaluation, and then gets the infusion, are we billing a visit, a test cost, and an infusion cost? Are those 3 separate things that are going out? Or is there some combining that has to happen?
We have not typically been retesting them if they come in. So we're billing an encounter with the provider, an E&M visit, as well as the infusion. And then like Dr. Chuck said, that the medication is no charge.
Right. Okay, excellent. Do we have any other questions about infusions? This is our last panel group on infusions. Any questions or concerns? These are 3 great items, and actually this double combination now out there as well, we'll learn more about over time. A great way to take care of patients at high risk, keep them out of the hospital, keep them from death, obviously. Phenomenal thing to happen. Anything else? We have to be very careful about exact numbers on reimbursement with all things going on, so I'm not going to get into that specific here. We can get you to some of the panelists and they can talk to you about that. So that's why I'm kind of ignoring those questions. I don't want to get us into any specific issues regarding that.
Right, Dr. McNeely, there was just one question about if anyone has any experience with reimbursement from, you know, when we have a global rate. So, you know, if Cigna is going to pay you $105 a visit, has anyone had any success negotiating outside of that?
Anyone able to do that? I would assume that's something, but you know, you'd want to talk to your insurance companies before you started doing that to see where you're at. We did have one more question, Dr. Taylor. Any challenges encountered during the infusions?
We haven't had any difficulties during the infusion. I would say the biggest challenge as a whole has just been the amount of time that it takes. But specifically related to the infusion, like Dr. Taylor mentioned earlier, we had one patient with nausea, but otherwise the infusions itself have been very uneventful. The patients have spoke very positively of their experience. They seem to have tolerated it well, and all has gone well from that standpoint.
Great. And so nothing afterwards, no calls later, or how do you follow them? Do you have them call you? Do they have you follow with their primaries? They come back to the urgent care? What if they have issues? What are you telling them?
So because a lot of these patients are higher risk and are more prone to complications, a lot of them are having a lot of other things done in the clinic as well. I'd say a good majority, I want to say probably at least 2/3 of these patients also require chest x-rays because they're usually a couple days into the illness at that point. So I am almost always recommending follow-up for that at a minimum. To get a repeat chest x-ray in a week. But we do have a process in place in our clinic where we do callbacks just for all of our patients 2 days later. So we are checking up with them that way, but then I always recommend follow-up with their primary care doctor after the acute illness is passed.
You're not having a on-call process, just a regular callbacks when your offices are open, correct?
Basically,
okay.
Very similar to any other.
Excellent. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to our next topic. I'd like to introduce Dr. Armando Samaniego from StatMed Urgent Care. He's going to talk about vaccine administration and his experience. Dr. Samaniego?
Hello. Hi, my name is, thank you for the presentation. And it's been a wonderful thing just listening to the monoclonal antibody. Our StatMed covers we're in the Bay Area in the East Bay, and we have 4 centers and 1 virtual center. We straddle 2 counties that serve about 2.9 million people. And we started vaccinations, the process in early December. And I think my discussion, it also will dovetail very nicely into preparing for antibody infusion, because some of the processes are really similar, particularly what Dr. Chuck mentioned, some of the things you have to go through. And my presentation is just going to highlight the rationale. I think it's the right thing to do. And there was some question about reimbursement, because it's the vaccination is provided by our taxpayer dollars. The reimbursement is primarily for the infusion, is for the administration of the vaccine. It's $17 for the first visit, $28 for the second visit, and for a single dose, it's $28. The key thing that we see this in our clinics when we started is that it's way better than any marketing opportunity, because you get one heck of an impression when they're there, because not only are you giving them an injection, you're giving them a potentially life-saving vaccination, and they're there in your clinic being observed for 15 minutes, the majority, some are 30 minutes. So it is a very great way to bring in new patients that would not otherwise come to you, and they're very, very grateful. So I think it's the rationale to me. It's a totally a way to go. Getting started, you really need to identify two main people: a physician champion, a provider champion, and an internal management or coordinator that help you, with the administration of the paperwork and training. The applications you need to apply through generally your state, which is the same applications applying for the immunization registry, which is typically a pediatric thing that's done through the MMR, and that's usually how it started, and started in our state, and I think in all the others. In our state, it's called CARES, or California Immunization Registry, and you have to apply through that. That takes typically about 2 months, but they've been actually speeding that up to less than 4 weeks just to get people into the system. You'd have to also look into refrigeration and storage capabilities. Most of us are going to the Moderna, and we're also looking forward to the J&J, because these are refrigerated freezers that you can get at your facility. The Pfizer is ultra cold. Mostly hospitals are getting those, and most urgent cares don't do that. You would have to, provide the specificities of these refrigerators as well as the monitors. The documentation is probably what scares most people. And most of with a regular EMR, you can do the documentation and billing for the administration, but I would highly recommend using what your public county will direct you through their platform. In our Northern California, we use a platform called PrepMod, which is also being used across the nation. It's an East Coast company, and that's what the state of California uses to do vaccine registry. In California, they are moving to a new platform, but it's extremely helpful because not only are you able to do survey questions and answer questions and put in the lot number and also report it to the state, it does all the mandatory tracking that you need to report, which is usually very cumbersome if you're entering them by manually. So the EMR, the platform that the public health will direct you to through the county is probably a worthwhile thing. You may have to do some dual entry into your system, but it's well worth it as opposed to hiring someone to do it individually. I would highly recommend to work very closely with your county public health officer, since the vaccines are typically distributed through the state system, and then the state systems distributed through the county systems, the public health system. So currently there's a shortage on vaccines, and there's more capacity to give it than earlier, we're just waiting for more vaccine. We vaccinate in 2 counties. One county is much more favorable to us, meaning I'm not sure why we're getting more in one county and not so in the others. We are starting our second round of our second doses, which we started this 4 weeks ago. And we're just doing that process. We're vaccinating about 60 patients a day, and we hope to increase that to 100 a day, 7 days a week. I think urgent cares are uniquely positioned, and same with the antibody treatment infusion, is that we're open, 7 days a week. We can refer into it, into the system, not only same for vaccines. We're finding school teachers now are really trying to get vaccinated. And I think that's a good place for us to be, because we're open 7 days a week. We're actually busier than we have been in the past. Most of that has been testing. But we do have some capacity in some of our bigger facilities where we can have room to do an infusion center, and that's what we're looking at very seriously, and use it real similar to what Main Street Family Care is doing, is centralizing the referrals from urgent cares. In our county, we only have one location where we can refer to the antibodies, and that's through the infusion centers, through the infectious disease people. So there is a shortage in our area. We support nearly 3 million people. So the vaccine's a great way to go, but it's a good precursor into antibody infusion. So that's kind of my overall summary. Oh, the last thing, there's multiple reporting, and I'm sure Dr. Chuck will tell you, one of the things we missed early on is a vaccine finder, which is a federal reporting system. Not only have to report to the county, to the state, there's federal reporting, but once you figure that out, it's pretty straightforward. It's just a matter of making sure you have someone on your team that's doing all the reporting. And I presume the vaccine finder reporting is similar to the reporting that's required by the federal government. They want to report what you have on hand and how much you've given for the distribution. So that's pretty much in the nutshell of what we're doing. I'm happy to take any questions. And we're thinking seriously about doing antibody infusion therapy at one of our centers and using the others to refer into it. Definitely people are starting to call and ask for that. And I just had a patient yesterday that it wasn't directly my patient. They came in and one of the moms was actually just really recently diagnosed, and she was having early symptoms of having some trouble breathing. So I didn't see her, but I referred her directly to the infusion center that's available, and she got in. But it's something that's, I think I'm kind of jumping around here between the vaccine is really critical, but the vaccine, if you set up for vaccine, you're actually well positioned for an antibody infusion. So, all right.
Okay, we had a few questions for you. First, how are you deciding which patients get the vaccine? And are you getting an enormous number of calls in, or how do you get everybody? Do you schedule them? Do you pre-schedule them so you're sure you got the right people? What are you doing?
That's a good point. Basically, every county is, even though the states puts out a certain kind of, we're at 1B right now, but 1B category has multiple layers in it. And then depending on your county, we're doing the 3 categories in 1B, the 65 and older, the essential workers and teachers. So we follow that very closely. We basically use PrepMod, and if you're under a certain age, we don't sign you up and send the questionnaire. But we also, you have to have toward the end of the day, because we are able to, at a 10-dose vial, we're frequently pulling out 11 and sometimes 12 doses. So at the end of the day, we have our speed dial list that we call those patients that can come in and drop in and get a vaccine within the hour. And so we clearly are we want to follow the guidelines, but it's a little nebulous because the state will report one thing, but you have to follow the counties, where the county is at. And it's rapidly evolving week to week.
Remember that each state, even sometimes each county is different. So Ohio's different than California. One of the things we've done is we've pre-registered everybody. We have a large hospital organization, but people who want to get the vaccines are kind of pre-registering, and then that way we're getting a group of them and we're contacting them an appointment and giving them appointments. One of the questions was, do you have a few hours left in the day just in case you have vaccine left over, or a group of people that you can give it to so you don't waste vaccine?
Yeah, that's the number one thing we don't want to waste at all. Having people on the speed dial, it's a great thing to have, but sometimes people don't show up to their appointments. And one day we actually had to give it to, we just looked in our clinic. We try to wrap up the vaccination an hour or two before we're closed, so we can use our own patients. One time we had to actually go out and just recruit some people from just to give it, because we had 2 people that didn't show. And you only have a certain amount of time before the vaccine expires. Once you puncture a vial, it's roughly 6 hours that you have to give that vaccine. And if you puncture in the morning, you have to time it really closely. But yeah,
it's like someone wants to sit outside your door and wait for you to have an extra vaccine, I guess. Hopefully we don't get that out there.
That's been happening. People are hanging around vaccination centers. So the biggest thing.
So there was a couple other questions. Are you keeping the second dose for people on hand, or you're just giving them the first dose and hoping you have it later on?
Great. Our counties and state recommended to give all the vaccine out, and they've been pretty good about scheduling the second doses. Although I'm getting a little nervous now because there's been a shortage in vaccines. Okay.
I've seen in some states that the more you give, the more they give you, because the more efficient you are, the better at it, the happier they are to give you vaccines. So it's one of those things where keeping it doesn't help you.
Absolutely. And Shannon, you're absolutely right. We're hearing that up and down the state of California. If you're below a certain threshold of vaccines per day, they are not replenishing your supply. So the more you can do consistently and through the weekend, probably the better.
Okay. And who do you apply in California to get to be able to do the vaccines? Is it an enormous process? Who do they go to?
They would go, basically it's called the CARES system, the California Immunization Registry. And I would go there, but I would also go up through your county public health officer. They will direct you through to it, and they can actually help facilitate that process. And every
that's
state,
actually on the screen now.
Yeah.
Good.
Every state has.
Go ahead.
every state has a similar system. So, but I would definitely go through your county public health officer. They're the ones that are making the final call of who gets it in their county. You know, even though you apply to the state that you can do so much, it's the county public health officer who's going to distribute their allotments that they reach per county. So it's good to have a good rapport with your public health officer.
Excellent. Okay. Any final words on vaccinations?
I think it's a great thing to do, and it's you know, it's great for the community, and I think we should all be in on this.
Okay. Excellent. I found that I worked a couple of vaccine clinics here, and I found the patients are so happy to get the vaccine and so positive. It's got to be a great thing for our business. Okay,
Yes.
so we're going to switch gears quickly now that we've gone through those questions. I'm going to bring on Llewellyn Horwitz, the CEO of UCA, to talk about the advocacy role. Llewellyn?
Thanks, Dr. McNeely. Hello, everyone. As I think you all know, we've been working with the CDC and various divisions of HHS and other influencers for many, many months, and we've shared a lot of that work already on UC Access and on the website. So I'm going to focus this briefing on our most immediate activities. Since the Biden administration took office, there have been some shifts in either roles or contacts altogether. But we're very pleased that the relationships that we've been working on for the past months and years have really continued to grant us access to the new leadership, and all of the representatives that we've been working with have consistently expressed their willingness not only to help urgent care be better integrated into the national COVID pandemic response, but really with a view to longer term as well, which is great for our industry. We continue to work closely with the CDC on vaccine availability. We've talked about that a little already, and getting those allocations to urgent care centers who want to participate. We just had a meeting with them this morning, and they want to, and we hope to have a future webinar on that topic soon, particularly with the J&J vaccine coming out, which is such a good match for urgent care compared to the refrigeration requirements of some of the other ones. Excuse me. And in addition to improving just the allocations, we're also continuing to advocate for better fees for administering those vaccines. It's great to see how many of you are making this work, but it would continue to make it attractive and more attractive for urgent care to participate in that if it were more easily integrated into our existing business models. We also continue to advocate for better reimbursement for testing. We are hopeful that there'll be some improvement or at least inclusion in the upcoming stimulus package, as testing continues to be an important part of that, of battling the pandemic. Even with the vaccine coming out, the variants continue to keep testing front and center. And so we are hopeful that some of those discussions will come to fruition in the stimulus package. Lastly, for our participation for the therapeutics that we've been discussing today, we have been meeting very regularly with HHS. As we began this call, they really feel that urgent care is a great match for this. We've spent a lot of time talking about the handful of challenges that remain for participation to be very, very natural for urgent care, and have been very encouraged with what we're seeing already as the EUA evolves, and as we learn more from centers who are already doing therapeutics, and the work internally that HHS is doing to help remove some of those barriers where they can. So we're pretty excited about that. As far as participation, I've seen some questions in the chat. The team from HHS has put together a package on participating specifically for urgent care. I think we've already posted it on the listserv once, but we'll do that again and then add it to the homepage as follow up to this event with the recording of the listserv live today. Lastly, on the advocacy front, on March 2nd, which is coming up, we are doing a congressional briefing. And then on March 3rd, we are hosting a virtual congressional lobby day. And we would love all of you to schedule appointments with your members of Congress and participate with us on that day. We're going to have more information on that tomorrow in UC Access and the UC Access newsletter. And then we'll follow that up as well with information on how to schedule those meetings, some mechanics for doing that, tips on messaging, and some training on how to deliver those messages when you get those moments with those congressional representatives. So we're pretty excited about the opportunity there to really educate the new administration and the new representatives that have come along on a global scale about urgent care foundationally, as well as the role that we've played in COVID and the role that we will continue to play in the healthcare system. So that's all I have, Sean.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's really, really important, the advocacy role that UCA is playing, getting us the vaccines, getting us the monoclonal antibodies, getting out in front, because urgent care has been very important to the pandemic and our response and the number of people we've been able to test and the people we've been caring for. I don't think everybody understood how much we've done until now. So it's great that we've been able to do that, but we can't do it alone. There's only so many of us, there's only so much time. Getting yourself connected with the people in your community, getting connected to your congressperson, to your senator, to even your state people, even your local health department really helps get this information out there. We did have a few more questions. One of them was, if you're a high volume, like a high testing facility, should you be doing the monoclonal antibodies, or should you be, and I guess the question is, how many sites do you have? Do you have a central site? Do you have a way to test at a bunch of sites and only send to one location? Or do you have a partner, an infusion place, a hospital system nearby who can do it for you if necessary? Anyone else have any comment on that question? Nope, okay. We did have another question regarding the criteria for monoclonal antibodies. I don't know if the rest of the team is still on here. I can't see that in front of me. The question was, it's somewhat broad, the number of people who can get it. Is there any thought that this will be more tuned to certain people? Are we working to reduce the numbers? Are we reducing to actually increase the number of people that should be getting it?
This is Meredith Chuck. I think, there are, with ongoing trials, there may be some additional additional data to be able to further refine that. There aren't currently any ongoing plans at the moment. I think there are some sites that have made contingency plans initially thinking it would be a scarce resource, so have taken somewhat of a scoring system to try and predict who would likely in that group be the highest risk. But as of now, the criteria are as stands, and with the supply, as long as the limitation is not with the infusion, anyone who meets criteria, should be able to receive.
Thank you. Dr. Williams, did you have a comment to that, or?
I would just say that our 2 monoclonal antibodies are authorized just for use in high risk. However, our clinical program, we continue to study low risk. So at this time, just high risk, but the future may change depending on the data.
I don't know if we mentioned it. What was the number needed to treat to prevent a hospitalization or a death? I think we had numbers out there, right? They weren't that high, correct? Or is that out there, or is that not publishable yet? Or
so I would.
I don't have anyone with that answer.
No, I would say it's depends on if you look at the data as a whole or a subgroup, but it would be somewhere between, I would say, 15 and 20, something like that.
To prevent a hospitalization is what you're saying?
Or ER visit or hospitalization.
Okay, excellent. I mean, that doesn't, there's a lot of things that we do that are much higher number.
In our program, I would say in our phase 3 study, number needed to treat to save a life is actually 50. So given the pandemic, we would argue that's a relatively low number for a pandemic.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. There's a question about training. Is there training for infusion available for urgent cares? I don't know that UCA has a specific, but I'm sure that there's training. You might be able to go to your local hospitals or what have you. Maybe we can get some more information on that, get it back to everyone in UC Access or something to help out. One more question about monoclonal antibody treatment with the variants. I know that in our discussions there was some question as to whether that would be useful, if they're going to work or not. Have we any information on how they affect the variants?
So again, speaking for Lilly, with the UK variant, which I think is the one at the time is the most relevant. It looks like both of our antibodies, bamlanivimab and etesevimab, retain activity. The South African variant does not look quite as good, certainly. So we pay close attention to that, but that's why we are developing 2nd-generation monoclonals in case the variants would continue to become more resistant to current therapy.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone from HHS have any comment on that yet, or anything that they're looking at, or are we reviewing that, or is that something that's under the microscope currently?
This is Meredith Chuck. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think everybody, has that on the radar and are certainly awaiting more confirmatory data. There have been some pseudovirus data out there, like Dr. Williams alluded to as well. But from our understanding of the current majority of circulating variants, that the current antibodies are effective for what the majority is. But obviously, continue to monitor and wait for additional data.
Excellent, great to hear. Okay, we've come to about the end of our time now. I'd like to ask if there's any final comments from our panelists that they'd like to let us leave with. If not, I'll let Laurel send us out.
This is Meredith. I would just like to thank everybody for your time. It was a pleasure to be here and to be able to share a little bit about our program. We're really excited about the possibility of expanding the number of sites to be able to administer monoclonal. So please feel free to reach out. We look forward to working with you through this process, and happy to answer any questions in the future.
Thank you. We really appreciate you being here and taking the time for us, and I think this is a great important thing. Anyone else?
Dr. McNeely, I did see a question about that it looks like in some states, pharmacies are getting ahead of urgent cares receiving vaccines. I'd like to just speak to that quickly. We did
Sure.
early on in the vaccine process speak with the CDC about having urgent care have the ability to do direct contracting to be able to get access to those vaccines directly, the way that they're doing with a lot of the pharmacies. And the threshold for doing that was 200 locations, I believe, under the same ownership, which obviously excludes the vast majority of urgent care. And so that is part of the discussion we are restarting with them now as the new vaccines become available and are a little simpler to manage logistically. Of, is there a way for us to potentially get that level of direct contracting that some of the pharmacies have been able to access, which was part of the original plan all along. So we are addressing that.
That would be great. This isn't a short-term problem, unfortunately. We're in this for the long haul. We've been a year now. UCA, the college have been working on all these things, and we'll continue to be here. We'll be back in 2 to 3 weeks with another listserv similar to this. We may be talking about vaccines at that point. So I welcome you all back to that. With that, I will go ahead and let Laurel end us out.
Great. Thanks, Dr. McNeely, and to all of the panelists. Thank you so much, and the attendees too. I thought it was great questions, and I know I learned through this discussion today. So hopefully you did as well. This really concludes today's Listserv Live, but we want you to watch for more events. I think you heard Llewellyn allude to something that we'll do with the CDC on vaccines, and we've already had some other subjects brought up to us. So there's no shortage of information that people are looking for out there, and we hope to be able to respond to that. So watch for UC Access emails, the Listserv Live, all of those places, and we'll be announcing those. I do want to make sure everyone is aware of another free event that's taking place next week. February is Heart Month, and the College of Urgent Care Medicine has been working with the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, ACOG, as specifically related to maternal death situations. We often, it's obvious when someone, or typically obvious when someone is coming in pre-birth to, that they are pregnant, but not so obvious postpartum that they are pregnant. And the ACOG sees urgent cares as a center where there really can be something done to protect heart health and deaths. So they, in cooperation with the CDC, are putting on this webinar. It's Wednesday, February 24th at noon Eastern. It'll be once again listed in tomorrow's UC Access with the registration link. So we also wanted to make sure you were aware of that. And there will be, from today's conversation, there'll be some more information that will be put out there related to both the monoclonal antibodies, some thoughtful algorithms that you might want to consider, as well as Dr. Samaniego has kind of given us a how-to on implementing the vaccine strategy within his center. So we'll be posting those out on the COVID pages of our website. And with that, we will conclude and hope to see you all again. Thank you.